Hey, we're back. It's Postmortem
That's right.
on the Post Credits Podcast. All horror, all October.
That's right.
Yep. And today we're
And
talking about Poltergeist. Brand new on 4K too, by the way. Did you get the 4K version?
I did.
So did I. I got it today, like
Oh,
a few hours before the pod. I didn't think I was gonna get it in time, but then because I ordered it like Monday night, I'm surprised it got here this afternoon.
that's
'Cause
fast.
it's
Yeah.
Tuesday.
Yeah.
So I had already watched like half of it, so I put it on. I watched the last half in 4K.
hmm
So
Did you see a noticeable difference? Because I thought it looked really great. Like what they
it
did with
did.
this new transfer. The sound was really good. I think there's an Atmos mix. I know it's back in theaters right now, and people have been asking me about going to see it. And I want to, but I've watched it twice already.
Right. Yeah. And it's like this is a staple for me. So it's like, well, how many times can I see it? Like I don't even need to watch it really to have a
Just
conversation about it,
get those
because
opinions out
it's
there.
right. It's just like would you consider this movie a classic? When I was doing research, that's what this movie kept being referred to as was a classic.
Yeah, no, I think I would. Yeah, not two
I
or
would
three
too.
so much, but yeah, the first one definitely has its place and time, and it's it looks great. It ages really well, and I'm glad that people get to discover it on a new format because it deserves it. It's one of those ones that just people need to see this if they haven't seen it. I think it's kind of a transformative thing.
Yeah. I put it like when I think of ghost stories, I think of The Fog and Poltergeist. Those are like my go-tos,
Okay.
you know? Uh and I also like for some reason I always put this movie and Ghostbusters together, right? Because I want to say like the paranormal investigators, I feel like would have lived in the same world as Ghostbusters and
hmm
that they may have helped each other out. And if we were thinking about expanded universes at the time, that like this paranormal group would have been like advising the Ghostbusters on some stuff, you know?
Okay, or maybe patrons of Raise a Cult or something.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Something.
Coming up
But
on
they
Zoom calls there.
seems like there's connective tissue between them. And the special effects kind of look the same,
I,
you know?
I I agree with that. Yeah, I mean definitely that. I do want to talk about that because the special effects and the lighting are just incredible. I mean, there's this real like living personality to it that I do feel like that's a great way to put that. Is that like this and Ghostbusters kind of live in that same world?
Yes. And same creepy factors from these paranormal things, you know? All right.
Yeah.
I'm excited to talk about this one. And I've got a really interesting breakdown that happened after this movie or during the movie and then after it where people stand on it. It's pretty interesting.
Oh, okay.
So
So not the curse,
it's
but
no, it's not the curse. It's who made this movie?
okay. Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. I mean, not only
Yeah.
with the curse, but is it a Steven Spielberg or a Tobe Hooper movie? That
Yeah.
is just a weird legend in and of itself. So,
And it feels like a lot of it's made up, but I've got a very specific breakdown and we'll get to there because it has some like high moments to it where it's like this is out of the ordinary, this is
yeah,
extraordinary, you know.
yeah.
The level of blaming blame game happening with this movie is interesting, and
hmm
then you know certain people coming in and saying, hey, you owe that other person some money because of what you did, you know.
Yeah.
So, we'll
Okay.
get to it.
Yeah. All right.
We'll get
Well,
to it.
strap in. We're gonna talk some news, and then we'll jump right back into this.
Go ahead.
Okay. Well, hang on to that because I was just going to talk about the internet outrage over the Chris Pratt Mario voice, which they
Hmm.
were complaining about before the Mario trailer, which came out a couple days ago, even came out because that's what people do. It's like they just jump on something without having
Yeah, but
seen it, and then
Chris Pratt, he's so cool. you know.
Well, that's kind of what they're complaining about, right? Is it's like he just sounds like Chris Pratt.
Yeah.
And
Well, I mean, what do you expect
in
though?
in
What
in
were people
fairness to
thinking?
him, in slight fairness to him, because I am going to pick on him just a little bit,
Okay.
is
Sure.
it doesn't just sound like Chris Pratt. He's doing like Chris Pratt with like a 15% Mario voice.
But it
So
still sounds like Chris Pratt.
it's
Like you can
just off kilter where he is trying, but he's still totally Chris Pratt because he's not a voice actor.
legendary.
That I think deserves a little bit of picking on him because he made some comments there like, "Oh man, the voice I'm working on, it's like nothing you've ever heard before."
And it sounds exactly like him.
I suppose that's true in the sense where it's nothing like
Like
you've
you can
heard from Nintendo.
right, but you can still tell it's Chris Pratt. I mean,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
haven't watched the trailer. This stuff just doesn't interest me. What does though is outrage. That that's like my bread and butter. Like, what are people outraged about?
Okay.
You know,
Uh-huh.
That just always puts a smile to my face whenever something like what are they gonna be mad about? And then it's like, well, what did what did you think was what do you think it was gonna be like? That's kind of Nintendo's fault. You get mad at Nintendo for going along with this, but it's like it's Chris Pratt.
Mm-hmm.
He's He's, just he's a guy, that's in movies. He's not this fantastic, highly regarded actor,
Yeah.
you know. So,
I mean,
of
neither
course,
neither is Jack Black, but he does the voice of Bowser, and like I didn't even know that until after the trailer. Like, oh, see, he actually tried.
right. Well, and then it goes back to the argument of like, well, shouldn't voice actors do voice acting?
Ding 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 ding
That's
ding.
kind of the thing, right?
Yeah.
We have a whole group of people that's their career. I think that they might have a better understanding of how to do emotional stuff with the voice because they don't have their face to show us,
Right,
like
or their body to act with. I mean,
yeah,
they're still acting with their body, and you can hear that. But that's kind of a whole nerdy thing. But it's like that old radio trick where you smile when you read a voiceover, and you can hear the smile.
yeah,
You know.
yes, yep. So, do you think they'll pull like a Peter Dinklage Destiny type of scenario where they just yank Chris Pratt out of the movie and cast somebody else, and that's that, and get Peter Dinklage out of the game without really like kind of unceremoniously just get out of here. That's kind of what happened there. Maybe
I
maybe
I
then
hope.
Nintendo will do the same thing.
Yeah, I don't know. I hope not. It'll be fine. I don't think all the people complaining really wanted to hear 90 minutes of "It's a me, Mario," like that,
No, I don't
like
think so
dialogue,
either.
because like no disrespect to the actor who coined that voice and has been used in all of the games since Mario's had a voice. It's perfect for those 1 second voice clips.
Yeah.
You don't want to hear 90 minutes of that. You don't.
Let
Like,
alone just a conversation about somebody's day. You know,
right?
I
Yeah.
would be like, shut the fuck up. I don't want to even hear it. You could be the president. I don't want
Give
to
me
hear
some
you.
Tylenol. Just,
Yeah. Oh, I went to the store.
yeah.
I don't give a shit.
It's
No, don't talk to me, please.
it's perfect and amusing for those
Yes.
instances in games
Grab a
where,
coin.
yeah, gets hit, kicks a
Jump on
turtle
something.
shell.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, you don't want to hear a voice like that. So
No.
I hope it's one of those things where the movie will come out and then people will just sort of simmer down and yeah, it's Chris Pratt, but it's fine.
I
I mean,
just think the whole thing is absurd.
it was even
You know?
grating like back in the day during the Super Mario Brothers Super Show, where you had a guy You remember that, right? It was out
Yeah.
after school. "Have you had a guys for now for schizo?" Just doing that kind of thing, and it like, man, this is hard to sit through. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
so anyway,
You know, they didn't even do that with the Mario Brothers movie, you know, that already came out
oh,
with
with Hoskins,
yeah, and John Leguizamo,
mm-hmm.
you know. Wow.
Luigi from the Bronx. Hey, Marty, it's Luigi from the Bronx. Remember me?
Right.
Boom.
Oh god. Well,
What a
yeah.
sad movie. Carlito's Way, for anybody who understands that reference.
Yeah, it's a deep cut. I love that movie. I don't even know what you're talking about.
So we're back here. We're on the other side. The
Yeah.
beast has us in its thrall.
Yeah.
You know, I hadn't seen this movie in a long time. I
How
mean,
long are we talking about?
I was a kid. It's one of the first movies I remember seeing as a horror movie. We mentioned this on another podcast that we were guests on, and it was one of those movies that it's always like, oh yeah, Poltergeist, I should watch, and it just kind of slipped by. And I feel like that was kind of a byproduct of, you don't, like, you're just in the store like going through like what movies can I buy, and they just never had it, didn't have it. And then I remember talking to you, and you're like, "Oh man, but that Poltergeist, like you know what? It was really fucking great. Like, I'm gonna track that down. I'm gonna buy that." That was cool because that was like seeing it again for the first time,
Now,
and
when was this? When did you see it again for the first time?
like 15 years ago,
Oh, okay. So you
a
saw it
long
as a
time.
kid
Yeah,
and then saw it like post college
yeah,
somewhere.
yeah.
Okay. This movie scared the shit out of me as a kid, and I always remembered it. So it's always been in my collection somehow. And right now I have two versions of it. So because
Okay.
I got the $5 bargain bin Blu-ray that you can find sometimes, right?
Hmm.
And then obviously we just talked about the 4K. So I have that, which is superior, you know.
Oh my, yeah. This was such a great upgrade over that
Yeah.
DVD, because that's what I had, was the DVD, like the whatever anniversary edition
I
back when
don't
that
think
came
mine's
out.
even that.
It was one of those crummy ones where it was like the cardboard and you
Oh
had
my
like the living hinge
god.
on there. Yeah, it wasn't
Yeah.
great. And then when I saw that they were putting this out on 4K, I was just like, I need this again.
Yes.
This is worth having.
And real quick to talk about the 4K version, it's definitely worth it. Sometimes I feel like with 4Ks it's not that great of an update or upgrade.
Hmm.
I feel like it's worth it with this one. Like I feel like if you don't have it, like just purchase the 4K, you know.
Well, it comes with the Blu-ray, so if you don't
Right.
have it, just there you go. Even if you don't have
Right.
4K, and you just get the Blu-ray there, because it's based
Right.
off that updated transfer and sound mix, and it ages really well. There's so much just nice texture in here that I feel like you just, I don't know, I never appreciated on DVD like a peasant until
Right. Right.
seeing it.
So they called this the summer of Spielberg when this movie came out. Did you know
Yes,
that?
I did. Reason being,
A week prior, E.T. hit the theaters. 1 week prior.
hmm,
That's wild, you know? So yeah, that's what they called this summer because it's like a 1-2 punch of like, I mean, E.T. was out of the stratosphere, you know, and it still is. But this finished like eighth highest grossing movie that year. You know, this wasn't some like slouch of a movie. It did really well
hmm.
critically and audience. Everyone seemed to love it. And yeah, I think it still stands up. There's some genuinely good scares in here. I really love the special effects. Uh, it's a treat. You don't come across these types of movies too often, you know?
Yeah. Well,
So,
and I've got a theory of why it holds together so well, right? And I think so. This came out, and ET came out in 1982.
yes.
Not very many years prior, you had the Amityville horror situation, where
That's true.
where this made national news. Like, our family was chased out of our house by ghosts, right? Like, that was
Yeah.
national news. And I really love the fact that there's a point in time that, you could be a national celebrity on talk shows, Johnny Carson, whatever, because of some weird ghost story, and then the TV just turns off for the night, and then it's, people are captivated by the family, the book, the movie. None of the encounters quite add up, right? I mean, because one said things that the other said didn't happen. Then you got all the stuff that the Warrens had their involvement
Yeah,
in it
like
too.
so yeah, the Warren involvement's particularly dumb because they weren't really around. I read the book that documents the Amityville horror.
Mm-hmm.
So it was like a blip in the radar, but for their point of view, it's like they solved this giant mystery, and it's like they weren't they weren't really
They
there,
they
you
basically
know.
came in and said, "Yep, this happened," because there was a local news company doing a documentary piece on it.
Yeah.
The only reason I bring this up is because, again, the national consciousness was captivated
Mm-hmm.
by the Amityville incident. And then you have people like Steven Spielberg and the writers come in who are legitimately great storytellers and kind of put together their version of it. So
Mm-hmm.
I feel like, people were still probably into the concept, but then you had people kind of take all of this crap that doesn't add up and then figure out how to tell a real story with it. And I think that's why, for my money, even though that Rod Steiger movie is a classic, you'll never have a better Amityville horror movie than Poltergeist.
That's a good way of putting it. And I agree.
Thank you.
I think Amityville horror or Amity horror, whatever the hell. I get it so confused. Here's why. Because I get confused by the name because when I'm at a show, I have an Amity Island travel poster that I
Mm-hmm.
sell, right? And people always say, "Can I get that Amityville Island poster?"
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So they've rotted my brain by telling me that over and over again. it's 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 seeped into my brain and now I can't call it correctly. Anyways,
Well, you had mentioned
it's there. Like Amityville Horror is a good movie, but I don't think it holds up at all.
not like this.
No, no. So
Yeah. Well, you had mentioned that this was the summer of Spielberg, and I think that's a good place to segue into the special effects for a minute here.
sure, yeah.
Because Frank Marshall, the producer, one of the chestnuts I came across was that um, Steven Spielberg and him were having a conversation, and he said, and then the house implodes. And then that's what Frank Marshall called the $25,000 or the $250,000 sentence.
Right.
So it was the summer of Spielberg and the $250,000 sentence, because it's like, how do
How,
we do that?
right. How
And
do you do yeah.
I did look it up and track it down, so I do have information on that. So let's just hold that back for a minute, because that's the end of the movie, and talk about some of the other effects that went on here. Like, do you have any standouts? Just things that?
Oh, there's a lot. And I mean, the house imploding is still like one of the greatest sleight of hands because it looks so good and you're like, how could they do that?
Mm-hmm.
You know? Um, but I really like the monsters, like that puppet that um is in front of the doorway at the climax to the movie. The white one with like the really weird limbs and everything.
Right. Yeah.
I think that looks awesome. I
Which,
kind of forget how awesome it looks until I see it, you
yeah.
know?
Well, to your point, I feel like that one hangs very. To your earlier point, I feel like that one in particular hangs very well with the Ghostbusters art style.
Yes, yeah. Um I also really like, um it's so interesting because it's like formats have gotten so better. There's moments where I can like be like I can think back to him like, yeah, I never noticed that because it was on VHS or something and it wasn't clear. But what I think is really awesome is that when those orbs are coming down the stairs, like we're all seeing them, but then they replay the video, right? As those orbs that came down the stairs get closer, you can actually see people, right? Like that, like the orb is just kind of like their center, but then you can see like the slight transparency around them. Like there's people wearing like older clothes and everything that are around these orbs,
Hmm.
and you don't get to see that with shittier quality, shittier transfers, and
Lack of texture, yeah.
yeah, yeah, it's really faint, but yeah, you can see these people, you can make them out. It's easier to spot in the 4K, but I love that little touch to it. That these aren't just like floating light bulbs. It's actually like that's their soul, and you
Hmm.
can still see them in an apparition. Um, I like that. And then also the skull in the closet's pretty fucking terrifying.
That
That
is, yeah.
comes after
The,
Craig T. Nelson there.
the
You
the
know,
the clown that was creepy before it came back to life.
yeah, yeah. Did you ever see the remake? By the way,
Oh, with was that Sam Rockwell?
yeah,
Nah.
I hated him as the dad. That's why I didn't like it too much. He's just a loser. Whereas I felt like Craig T. Nelson was like a really good dad who got a shitty hand dealt to him because of these fucking spirits. But it just seemed like Sam Rockwell's portrayal was like he just sucks at being a dad.
Hmm.
So that's why I didn't like it.
No, yeah, no, I didn't watch that one. Yeah, and that
It's
didn't
not
come
worth it.
out too far after the Ryan Reynolds Amityville one.
Right. Oh, it's like a battle of supremacy through the ages. Which haunted house movie's better? Amityville Horror
Mm,
or Poltergeist? Well, I will say the Ryan Reynolds one is better than the Poltergeist remake. That's
okay.
actually like a good movie. That Ryan Reynolds one, Poltergeist, the remake is garbage. I think that's French for garbage.
Ah,
Yeah.
the garbage.
Yeah.
Okay. No, I
Um,
didn't see that. I've seen some of the sequels though, and I also thought those were kind of yeah.
the second one's okay. The third one, it's like no one wanted to be in it, so they shipped, Carol Ann to Chicago to be with relatives, you
That's the
know?
apartment building. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
cool poster, but yeah, that was
yeah.
not a great movie.
No,
They were really reaching to just continue on with that because it
right,
was
right.
popular and made a decent amount of money.
So, one thing that I want to say real quick, this is off topic and away from the special effects, but how about that Cheetos product placement? Like, did you notice that this time around? I mean, I noticed it. I notice it every time because I do a God, that's annoying.
There's more
Whenever I
Cheetos.
see right, because it's like they cut and it's a guy like pouring Cheetos into his hand, but in a really super weird way where it's
Hmm.
like, I get it. It's Cheetos. It's not just like sticking his hand into the bag like a normal person pulling out. It's like who pours out chips into their hand
I
and then eats it?
I want all of the cheese powder on my hand
Yeah,
instead of right at the fingertips where you can just lick it
yeah,
off. It has to be the whole hand. Yeah, no, that is a
yeah.
weird thing.
But it's like it's only to show that it's a Cheetos name brand. That's the only reason why they did it. It has to be. And I'm just thinking, like, man, that's got to look so huge in the theater. And we're seeing it on our TVs now, and it's like, I mean, in the theater, this Cheetos logo is going to be like 20 feet wide.
Hmm.
So I just wanted to talk about that.
I
The
didn't.
over the top, on the nose, Cheetos branding. I'm like, man, I bet you they got a lot of money from Cheetos. I bet you that's like half the budget of this movie is just from Cheetos. you
Well,
know.
you got a $250,000 house to pay. I don't
Right.
think that actually cost $250,000. I feel like that's an exaggeration. I did see the model that the miniature of the house that they used for the finale by itself cost $25,000, but we're not quite there yet. So you mentioned the and this also doesn't have anything to do with the effects. When we were talking about the mummy, you mentioned about how many times the term ancient Egyptian comes up.
Yeah, it's a lot. It
Okay.
is many.
Well, I feel like the use of Carol Ann
Is equally as bad.
it probably beats that because there's an
Carol Ann, Carol Ann. Yeah.
there's an actual statistic on that, right? She is called out by name 121 times in this movie.
Holy shit. It's wait a minute. This movie's less than 2 hours. What is like the BPM or heartbeats per minute, if you will, of the Carol Ann
Probably
in the movie?
1.5.
Yeah, it's got to be like every minute and a half or so.
Mm-hmm.
Less than that.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Yeah, especially once things pick up and, she's gone to the other side and it's
Yeah, I mean, if anyone does this, they will go to the other side. If anyone makes a drinking game out of how many times someone says Carol Ann in this movie,
oh yeah, don't do that.
this is worse than John Wick 2, you know? You don't know that meme? Do you remember that one?
No.
I'll tell it to you because it sounds like you don't remember it. There's like this meme where it was like, for John Wick 1, it was like, take a drink each time John Wick kills someone by shooting them in the head, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it was like this guy in an ambulance, right? Because he got alcohol poisoning, right? So he's like hooked up to IVs and everything.
Mm-hmm.
And then it was like the next meme was like the same, same type of thing, but for John Wick 2, and it was just a tombstone, you know?
Yeah, that's probably about right.
Yeah.
So
remember the memes I bring up.
that's the big takeaway here. All right. Yeah. Fair enough.
I'm kidding. Yeah.
So there's a legend out there that Spielberg demanded that they use real skeletons to bring the cost down.
Yeah.
I don't believe that Steven Spielberg demanded that they use real skeletons to bring the cost down. There's an episode on Shudder of Troubled Productions or Cursed Movies. I don't remember the name of the series. Cursed Films. Thank you.
Yeah.
And they talked about Poltergeist because of the curse, which we'll get into a little bit later. But one of the reasons people feel like the movie was cursed was because of the use of real skeletons. And they interviewed one of the special effects guys for that. And he got mad.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. He was like, you got to understand, like, everybody did this. It wasn't just us. And it is a fact that is an unregulated industry, and you probably can get real skeletons cheaper than plastic, like movie quality skeletons, right? I don't know what other movies use this. I haven't compiled a list somewhere. I just feel like it brings up the question of just because you can do something.
Should you?
Maybe, yeah, right? Because it's ethically questionable at best and morally dubious at worst.
Right.
Regardless of whether it's legal or not. So
there's a couple things. Like if you went like, okay, so I don't think a movie should be using real skeletons.
Mm-hmm.
But who's to blame? Like, would it be like this movie's bad because it has like human skeletons in it that they're using as props? Or is it like we should only blame the producer or the director or whoever made the decision where that should happen?
Yeah. Or the guy whose job it is to bring the budget down.
Right. Hey, we need more skeletons. Oh, we don't have any right now. Well, go make some.
Flip open this catalog here and
yeah, go get some more.
Yeah.
How are we gonna get it? I don't know.
That is one of the things though that people point back to, and I just think it's this fascinating urban legend I mean, this movie has a lot of fascinating legends around it, like the Spielberg Hooper situation, the curse,
Yeah.
because actual tragedies befell several people involved through the series. It wasn't just this movie, but it was kind of this thing that kind of took on a life of its own.
Oh yeah.
There isn't as much to that as the Spielberg Tobe Hooper thing, but just to put a final pin in the special effects there, do we want to talk about the house?
Oh sure.
Do you know
Yeah,
how
let's
this
talk about.
happened?
I don't know. And part of me doesn't want to know. I'm cool with it because it's like I always love sleight of hand and like just since I don't know how they could have done it. But for the sake of the podcast, I want to know.
It's one of the greatest things ILM has ever done. I mean,
Okay.
they use some really cool techniques, and it's not as far as I know, it's not like this is something they detailed on any behind the scenes featurette or anything else like that. They still talk about it to this day. Like ILM on their website talks about this effect and how they did it as one of the greatest things they've ever done, and why our name means something. And it still looks great. It is a marvel of compositing because of how difficult optical effects were to do back then, because this wasn't a computer generation, a green screen thing. I mean, they did blue screen where the family did their part in it, but the model of the house was so detailed. I think I mentioned the cost that I saw that estimated at $25,000 just for the house itself. It had furniture, like accurate furniture that would have been in the house. So they really studied that model. And when I say it was a miniature, it was 6 feet wide by 4 feet tall.
Yeah, that's like Lord of the Rings level miniatures, you know? Because it's like you really have to air quote miniatures, you know?
It's not inaccurate, but it's not small either.
Right, right.
So basically, they spent 9 months, is what I had read, R&Ding different materials that it was
Mm-hmm.
built out of. They attached steel cables to the inside of the thing, mounted it over a large funnel, like a large black funnel, so even bigger
That's wild.
than the
I
model
know where it's
itself,
going now. Yeah.
and actually pulled it into itself. Now, legend has it the visual effects supervisors were standing by with shotguns in case they had to like actually blow something up, because behind the gigantic funnel that they're sucking it into, they also had an industrial vacuum so that none of the debris got away. So it actually looked like not only are we blowing this up, sucking it into itself, it can't escape. It's pulling everything into
I see.
an actual black hole.
It's very elaborate and seemingly dangerous.
Probably.
Right? Because I'm just thinking of the cables. You said they had cables to pull the house through the funnel,
Hmm.
right?
Right. So they're attached to like the inside walls and the
Yeah.
furniture and different things so that they can actually pull it from the inside.
You ever see like a wire snap from tension? It's like terrifying
Yeah.
because it's just going, it seems like this thing's whipping a million miles an hour and could just like, cut off limbs, people's body parts if it were to snag somebody.
Sure.
You know,
Yeah.
actually, a really cool video, and it fits into this podcast. Is that that satellite at where Goldeneye was, where they had the climax, where
Yeah.
006 that recently fell apart because problems with the high tension wires.
Oh,
So,
wow.
within like the last year or two, it did. Might have been during COVID or peak COVID. Uh, but Yeah, one of the wires. So they had three anchor points to suspend the satellite,
Hmm.
and there were dozens of high tension cables to support this giant structure. And it's so interesting because it's like one failed, And since it was all like mathematically figured out how many cables they need,
Everything's
just
bad.
because one snapped, they all went, you know?
Uh-huh.
And seeing those huge cables, because we're talking about cables that are like 4 or 5 inches thick, just weighing lace to trees below it, it's like, man, the power to snap that cable, that's incredible, you
Wow.
know? And that's a very large example, but something like that could still happen on, Poltergeist pulling a
Yeah.
home through a funnel, even though it's
So
miniature.
the final dinner party fact I have for that is that they filmed it with a high-speed camera at 360 frames a second.
Oh, so you get the clarity.
Well, yeah, right. And then when you play it back, every second in real time would have been about 15 seconds. But whatever they used when they sucked it in was so powerful that the whole thing only lasted for 5 seconds.
Oh, wow. So they had to slow it down. Yeah.
I mean, if you didn't have that, it just it's just
Yeah.
gone.
Go. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
But
At least they knew that all of that. They knew what they needed to do to get the look,
Mhm.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
I love that though.
And
The
it's
ingenuity.
practically seamless. I mean, to this
It
day,
still
like
looks
you
great.
really look at it and it looks just chef's kiss, amazing. And
And it
then
sells the movie. I think if it wasn't for that scene, like if that scene looks like crap,
mhm.
I don't think it would be as memorable, because it's so crazy to see. You're just like, wait, what am I looking at?
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
Uh and it's more frightening because it looks so good. Like it looks so real. Uh that you're just like, oh my god, it's happening. You're
Well, it's like what is happening and then you can't believe what you're seeing.
yeah, exactly. No, it's perfect.
Yeah.
That's amazing. That's awesome.
You know what else is amazing is that
What?
they ILM pulled that out of the funnel and then put it in like a clear box, and Spielberg has that in his office.
Oh, that's awesome.
Just this pile of garbage of this collapsed house.
That's awesome. That's really cool. Of anything, I think I would want that the most, just to have somewhere. Like,
It would be a
look at
nice
this
conversation
artifact of
piece.
this crazy thing I did or
Hmm.
helped do in my career.
Yep.
But I guess that's a good segue for what I got. Who directed Poltergeist? Was it Hooper or Spielberg? A breakdown.
Could have been you. Could have been you. Could have
Right.
been.
Could have been any one of us. It's interesting. So we talked about how this is kind of where it all began. We talked about how E.T. came out a week before Poltergeist. And the reason that happened is you had two different movie companies working on two different projects at the same time. However, Spielberg was under contract with Universal Pictures, who put out E.T., to not work on anything until E.T. was done, right?
Hmm.
So he couldn't take on another directing role. And so Spielberg hired Tobe Hooper to do Poltergeist based on Texas Chainsaw Massacre and Funhouse. So this is his third movie, but his first studio movie. So there immediately begins like animosity. And I don't believe, from what I've read, that there's animosity between Tobe Hooper and Spielberg. It seems like, from what I can gather, it's dumbasses stirring the pot, trying to make something out of nothing. So Steven Spielberg is said to be on set all the time, and that Tobe Hooper was just a de facto director to get around this clause that Universal Studios had. So it got weird when, after the movie's done, so they've gone through this creative process together. They've been working on this film for a while. Everything seems to be smooth sailing, but where it gets weird is in the title sequence of this movie. So Spielberg has two credits where it says he's a co-producer and a co-writer of Poltergeist, which is true.
Hmm.
but those
It was his
titles,
idea, and he hired the writers.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, but his font sizes, it's so weird that it comes down to this. His font sizes for his credit was larger than Tobe Hooper's directing credit. So it went all the way to the Directors Guild of America, and they did an investigation to see if doing that it denigrated Tobe Hooper's involvement in the movie. And they found that it did. And Tobe Hooper felt that it did as well. And he was actually asking for $200,000, and it was settled through arbitration for $15,000. So Tobe
Wow.
Hooper got like a check, but at the same time, it's like I don't view it as malicious. You know, like I don't feel like Spielberg at the time was trying to tell Tobe Hooper or anybody else that this is his movie.
Mm-hmm.
The other interesting lens to look at is that Amblin Entertainment, this movie came out before Goonies, before Back to the Future, before all of that stuff, before the Steven Spielbergian style movie making, right? Where it's like some people still get confused that, you know, Back to the Future is Robert Zemeckis and not Steven Spielberg. Same with Goonies is Richard Donner. You know, they think it's a Spielberg movie because Spielberg's name is on those.
Mm-hmm.
So this was like the prototype of that kind of arrangement where Steven Spielberg is more of a hands-on producer, right? So it's weird. The other thing to look at the time is there was a director's strike coming, right? They didn't know if they were actually going to be able to finish a bunch of these movies, including E.T. or Poltergeist, because of this looming director's strike. So one theory is that Steven Spielberg was placed there, maybe through himself, just in case there was a director's strike, that he would be able to come in and finish Poltergeist.
Because he's not the director.
Right. He's not, it's semantic, right?
Yeah.
Like, but that's kind of, and that makes sense. I guess the other weird thing is that when I said it gets weird because of the title thing, it kind of starts this cascade effect of people thinking that Tobe Hooper didn't direct this movie, right? When it was kind of an argument based on just a font size, right? So now you have all these people saying like, oh, he didn't direct it, he did. They're saying that like he wasn't involved and Tobe Hooper was just a yes man, even though like Tobe Hooper had done so much work in the background to get this movie where it needed to be. And he had the vision to do this, you know. It boils up. There's so many bad feelings. It boils over where Steven Spielberg takes out a Hollywood Reporter ad that's a public apology to Tobe Hooper. It's so weird. Like, I don't think that these types of disputes or bad feelings would ever be solved in the public eye. You know, it's basically like Steven Spielberg took out an ad to say, I'm sorry about how you feel about this movie. It's just interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think a lot of what muddies the water too is that, you know, people start asking the actors, and it's pretty well known that Spielberg was very hands-on with the visual effects component.
Yes.
And, you know, Tobe Hooper was I mean, it really feels like they were running two units, you know?
That's how I looked at it. Yeah. When I was
Yeah.
like kind of sifting through all this information.
Mm-hmm.
Because basically what it comes down to is there's two camps, that this was like they were working together to make this movie, right? Or that Steven Spielberg hired him and Tobe Hooper just sat in the back seat, right? Like it seems like it was a culmination of talents coming together to work on this unique project, not Tobe Hooper being a lesser director, but a good name that Steven Spielberg could push aside, you know?
Right.
Um,
Yeah, and then you have people who are more involved with the effect sequences, and they're like, "Well, he was my director," and then people who are
right,
more involved with the other sequences. Yeah,
right,
no, it's a real weird, muddy situation.
right,
The whole thing with ET is really fascinating because that just blows my mind that you could work on two just gigantic, mega hit movies like this
right,
at the same time, and they
right.
both turn out to be not only good but like defining.
Oh yeah, it's insane. It's totally insane. Like you can't comprehend like the amount of energy that Steven Spielberg would have to put forth just to get these two projects done. Not just done, but like done in an amazing way, where people are still talking about them.
Hmm.
Another interesting thing is that the co-producer Frank Marshall that you mentioned before, um, went on record in the LA Times stating that Spielberg, not Hooper, was the true director of the movie. I just think it's really awful for people involved in making this movie to diminish someone like Tobe Hooper who put forth a ton of effort for this movie. I
Yeah.
mean, you go back and it's like he was doing storyboards to figure this stuff out. He was there every day. And Mike Garris put it best. He said, or Mick Garris, he said that Tobe Hooper, regardless what everyone is saying, is the one who says action and the one who says cut. And I think that like really kind of like puts it everything into focus.
Hmm.
Like you can have a collaboration with another talented person, but it seems like what Mick was saying is that no, Tobe Hooper was in the driver's seat the entire time. But you mentioned that another actress like came on record recently and said some like defamatory stuff about Tobe Hooper.
Yeah, it was Zelda Rubinstein, the one that plays kind of the Elizabeth Warren character.
Okay. Yeah.
It was in one of the I don't know, like one of the anniversary articles, and you know, she said some bad things about him, that he had drugs involved, and
Right.
he was really unprofessional. But then the actress who played the mom in the movie came to his defense and said, I don't know where this came from. He was really kind to her. And,
Right.
it's just,
Right.
yeah, it's such a weird thing that there's even a controversy about this.
Right. And the weird thing is like there's not one example that I can find of one or the other, Hooper or Spielberg, overstepping like what their roles were, other than the larger font sizes in the title being an issue. You never hear any one of them saying like, "Oh, this was a problematic shoot to work on." I just think it's people making shit up, like stirring the pot on the outside to try to get some sort of social credit, I guess. Because and the other thing, like this movie is so old now, right? 82 is 40 years ago, right?
Hmm.
And even relatively recently, we've got the Blumhouse official website posted a statement from first assistant cameraman of Poltergeist. We're just like, bring out the best boy grip and let's hear what he had to say about Tobe Hooper, right? And it seemed so mean, where it just feels mean to me, where this person said Hooper was so nice, he was just happy to be there. To me, that sounds like that's just a guy that'll say yes. He's a yes man. And I
Yeah.
don't believe Tobe Hooper to be a yes man from to even just Texas Chainsaw Massacre,
Well,
you know?
yeah. And even all the promotional materials from the time when they're showing the making of the movie, like here's the making of Poltergeist from 1982, it's
Right.
on Entertainment Tonight or whatever. um it doesn't help that Spielberg is the face on there, you know, but then they're showing like the effects, you know, like
Right.
here's all the, you know, movie magic stuff. And once again, that kind of like muddies the public perception. So you just have people who don't know what they're talking about saying, "Oh, well, see, that proves it because he's in all the behind the scenes footage," or this
Right.
one person said it, or whatever.
I think there's like a few things in history that people are missing. I think the director's strike that was looming was a big fucking deal, right? And I think that they're just trying to shore up any type of money, and so they spread out their abilities to get this movie made in a timely fashion, right? I
Mhm.
think that's what it was. But now it seems like, looking back on it, people are trying to make it into this feud between Spielberg that got out of hand. I think there might have been like an annoyance between Hooper and Spielberg for the credits, but then I think it was everyone else kind of talking into Hooper's ear, which is why Spielberg put out that apology letter
Yeah,
as an advertisement in the Hollywood Reporter,
yeah,
you
building
know?
up something that's not there.
Exactly. And it's a shame because I think Tobe Hooper deserves all the credit. Not all the credit, but when you think of a movie, you got to think like you must think Tobe Hooper made that. Tobe Hooper made Poltergeist. I think that's where it needs to end, not this weirdness.
Who's the
I
real director? Yeah,
Right, yeah. Who's the real one? Tobe Hooper is.
no,
He had the vision. He got it together. He was hired by Spielberg. Anyways, I just think that breakdown, these little things that just kept happening made this into a larger issue than what it was.
sure.
I think Tobe Hooper should have had a larger credit than Steven Spielberg for directing this. And I think it's right to bring that up. I think it's right for an investigation to have happened. But that's about it. I think that's where the story should have ended, but it just kept going. And people are
Talking
still
about it
talking
to this
about it.
day, yeah.
It's so weird. I never thought like that. When I thought of Poltergeist, I always thought of Tobe Hooper. It wasn't until we decided to record this that I'm finding all this information out on the past of this movie, you
Oh,
know?
okay.
So I always thought of it as Tobe Hooper. You just had that Amblin Entertainment, logo in front of it. I believe it's Amblin. I don't know. Steven Spielberg has so many movie companies that he puts his movies under, but I think it's Amblin because E.T. was Amblin as well. So, anyways, Tobe Hooper directed this movie, not Steven Spielberg.
Well, you know what else is kind of made up, but people have made it into a real legend is the curse of Poltergeist, which, as
Right.
I mentioned, there were several real life tragedies that befell people who
Yeah.
worked on the series, not just this movie, but the series. And you know, again, it's people like to gossip, and you know, it could have also been part of what I was saying in the beginning, where you know people are so captured by the story of Amityville and things like that that they want to gossip and fixate on any little aspect of it that they can. Whereas nowadays, you know, it'd blow up for a minute, but it'd probably move on. It especially probably wouldn't have persevered over the course of three movies,
Right.
because the young woman Heather O'Rourke passed away tragically through misdiagnosis for a congenital disease that she was suffering,
Yeah.
and you know that should have never happened under other circumstances. But that didn't happen until the third movie.
Right.
Um, the daughter, the actress who played the daughter, she had a bad breakup, and then boyfriend came back. They had an altercation, and she was strangled to death
Jesus
in
Christ.
her driveway. The
Did
actor
everyone
that
get murdered or dead? They all died? Like everyone? Does
well,
this person die?
this is the curse, yeah, right. So
Everyone's dying. Okay. All right.
yeah, so those are the two actors involved in the original, and then once they started expanding on the mythology of the beast or whatever that is, there's like this evil priest character in the second movie who was diagnosed with something that he wound up passing away from. And then there was a Native American who was in the third movie who was diagnosed with a disease that escapes me at the moment. He had a corrective surgery that doesn't have a very high success rate, but then he passed away, and it's just, you know. So there were several like real life tragedies that happened, but it happened over a longer period of time. So I mean, that it's kind of more illustrative of the point of like people making something up. And it's because they used the bones. There was like the real bones in the first one, and it's like,
well, Jesus Christ, dude, are we gonna die from just talking about this movie?
I don't think so. That's more made up gossip. So it's tragic what happened to all of them. It's a series of unfortunate coincidences, and it is really tragic that people had their lives and careers cut short, but it had nothing to do with this movie. It was completely stuff outside of it.
Yeah.
So on that downer,
yeah, tune in next week when we're talking about a different movie. Hopefully there's not a curse of everyone fucking dying.
This is a great movie, though, and I don't think it's a great movie because of the various controversies surrounding it. I mean, we can agree on that, right? Because we're talking about...
Yeah, no, it's a great movie. It's the most greatest movie. I don't want to talk bad about this movie. Why? I don't want to die.
No.
I don't want to be cursed. Maybe the other side, they're going to talk to the computer monitor instead of the TV and, just get murdered.
No, that's James Earl Jones now that he's retired from Darth Vader, and they're going to do that with AI.
Oh, yeah. There you go. It's like, I'm retiring from Star Wars. It's like, yeah, okay. Is your voice box too? They're just going to keep using your voice. Like he must have signed his name over or his voice over. They're just going to keep using it.
I feel like there's enough samples of that where they could,
yeah.
And the technology's so good you can auto tune that into whatever you need to. Now you know what though, like the controversies never enter into my mind when I watch this. It wasn't something I grew up with. It wasn't like, oh, I got to see this because that's wild. What happened? What's going on here? I just saw it. It was a great movie. It made a real impression on me, and I tracked it down later in life, and I'm glad I did, because it's not one of those things that I feel should just stay in childhood. It was a good movie. It remains a great movie. And if you haven't seen it, check out this new 4K version, because...
Yes, just go for the 4K. See this house implode in 4K glory.
That's right.
It's good stuff.
If this episode were Halloween candy, this one would be the razor blade and the apple.
It would be. Yes. 100%. This episode is that's a perfect analogy, for both of them. Both movies that we're going to be covering, because we're doing it a little different this year. Or this episode.
Just for this one, yeah.
Yeah, it's a double feature.